Okay, so today I'm thinking about fellowship. Fellowship, because I have to write this essay for Bible College. It says discuss the different concepts of fellowship or koinonia in Philippians. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to look at the 6 occurrences of koinonia in the book of Philippians to help us understand fellowship. Yeah. Usually we think of fellowship as going mamat stall, fellowship. But let's see what Philippians has to say about fellowship. So beginning with chapter 1 verse 5, because of your fellowship in the gospel from the first day until now. So here fellowship, actually in the ESV it says partnership is talking about investing in something. And that's very interesting, right? It's almost like a business venture with Paul and the Philippians. And in this business venture of the gospel, Paul is preaching the gospel. Paul is suffering for the gospel. Whereas the Philippians are doing something very different. They're supporting Paul. They're praying for him. They're sending him money. And I guess what this shows is that you can have different roles, but the same fellowship. And what this fellowship does is it helps us to focus not just on what we're doing, but the output. The output is that other people hear about Jesus. The output is that other people hear the gospel. And I guess that's very useful, right? Because if you want people to come together, you don't want them to be all doing the same thing, but you want them to be working towards the same end. So that's the first thing, the fellowship in the gospel. Number 2 is chapter 1 verse 5. It says, all of you are partakers with me, or all of you are sharers or fellowshippers with me in grace. And it's talking again about this gospel. And for Paul, this grace means he gets imprisoned. He is suffering for the gospel. But for the Philippians, they're sending him money, they're praying for him. But what's interesting about this is that they're sharing in this thing he calls grace. Meaning all of this is something that they don't deserve. All of this is something that God has given them. God gives Paul, okay, your grace is suffering. God gives the Philippians, your grace is giving. And that means when we have this grace, we have to see, I did not earn this. It's not me doing this. It's not me making this fellowship happen. But God has given me this share in this grace, in this fellowship. Yeah, so that's the second thing. Okay, number 3 is chapter 2, verse 1. And chapter 2 is a series of if clauses. So if you have any encouragement in Christ, if any comfort of his love, and if any sharing or fellowship in the Spirit. So it's really interesting because here it's saying that the source now is not just grace, we saw that in chapter 1 verse 7, but it's actually the Spirit of God. You have a share in the Spirit, I have a share in the Spirit, and the whole church, everyone who's in Christ, is sharing from this source of the Spirit. And the reason why Paul says if is because he's saying if you have this, therefore be one. If you have this, therefore be united and love one another. And what it's saying is that actually unity is something that God gives us by the Spirit. Unity is not achieved, unity is received. We receive the Spirit, we share in this, and therefore we have unity and oneness in Christ, in the Spirit. And so, it's a challenge for any church. You want to have fellowship, you want to go out, you want to makan together so that you have used unity, but actually even that fellowship is something that's given to us by the Spirit. That means it's supernatural, but it's also a grace. Okay, so that's chapter 2 verse 1. Next is chapter 3 verse 10. And here I think it talks about suffering. It says that I may know him and the power of his resurrection and share or fellowship in his sufferings. And here the focus shifts from us having fellowship with one another, but here having fellowship with Christ. How is it that we have this partnership, this connection with Jesus Christ? It's through his sufferings. Paul says, I want to know this. I want to know Christ. And therefore, I want to know what it means to suffer for Christ. And that's very scary. That's also very painful. And that's not very intuitive either, because we get suffering, we want to get out of it, but Paul wants to know it more. And somehow, thinking again of the grace, thinking again of the partnership, Paul sees it all tying together in Jesus. It is a grace to suffer for Christ. It is an investment to preach the gospel through your suffering to Christ. It lends a kind of credibility. And the result is other people hear about Jesus, but the result is also that Paul, hey, I also get to know Jesus deeper and closer. So what it says to us is that there is a deeper fellowship underneath our fellowship. There is a fellowship that we have even with Jesus. And it's not easy. Actually, it comes through suffering. And it says they're becoming like him even in his death. Maybe something that we can reflect upon this Easter. Easter is reflecting upon the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. How do we get closer to him? How do we know him? How do we love him more? Well, it's through his suffering, and it's also through ours. How are we suffering for the cross of Christ? That's number 4. Let's look at number 5 and 6. This is both in chapter 4 and verses 14 and 15. Verse 14 says, "It was good of you to share or fellowship in my trouble." And verse 15 says, "No other church entered into the sharing or fellowship in giving and receiving." And it's talking about how this fellowship can be denied. Very mafan. This Paul, he's so far away. I want to fellowship with the friends who are close by. Or this Paul, so sad. Every time I hear about him, he's suffering. He's telling me about all his struggles. I want to fellowship with people who love watching when life gives you tangerines. I want to fellowship with people who have the same interests as me. But no, fellowship is something that can happen over a long distance, that can happen with someone who's going through a tough time. And so you bridge that gap. So verse 14 is about sharing in Paul's troubles. That means you're concerned for him. Tell me how you're going, how your life is going. Let me pray for you. And verse 15 is talking about sharing that involves giving. That means I want to support you. I want to be there for you. And so it shows that fellowship is something that requires bridging of that gap, a kind of bridging of that distance, where we kind of like put our money where our mouth is. I'm reminded how my lecturer who was talking about fellowship, at the end of this, he talks about how the Philippians were supporting Paul, they're having fellowship with Paul, they're putting their money where their mouth is. And actually he said, I want to do the same. And so he gave us an envelope. Every student had an envelope. It said, I am partnering with you. And he says, I want to partner with you in your ministry. And he actually gave us money. Ang pao. And there's a certain integrity with it. And it costs him, but also it bridges that gap between the lecturer and the student. That means he's investing in us. And I guess if there's one word to take across from this whole idea of fellowship, is that word investment. Are you invested in that friendship, in that partnership with your fellow brother and sister in Christ? And if so, then put your money where your mouth is. Yeah. So 6 occurrences of fellowship in Philippians, talking about partnership, talking about grace, talking about the Spirit, talking about suffering, talking about bridging that gap, and talking about putting your money where your mouth is. And hopefully these different flavors will help us to see fellowship in a much richer, much deeper sense the next time we meet together as a fellowship, as a community, as a people of God.